Good morning, Monday morning from the Super 8 Motel outside DFW International Airport. But today we are going over to Fort Worth because we can't miss out on that. We spent too much on that little escapade to Buc-ee's yesterday. So today we're going to use a Fort Worth only pass, starting with TexRail, the Stadler FLIRT. And then we're going to go up to Grapevine because it looks like a fine little town. And it's right near the airport. It's on TexRail, and they have a deli that might be worth my time. I could use a sandwich for my soul today. Architecturally, this hotel room has a little bit more interesting stuff. The bathroom's not great. It also has some interesting extra stuff, but it also has spots of mold on the part up there. Curling iron burn there, otherwise that's okay. I do not recommend Life tissues. They will basically stick to your hands. They are not extra soft. Do not recommend whatsoever. But for 68 bucks a night, you get what you get. A couple days in Texas makes me want to go back to New Jersey.
The likelihood of my booking this Super 8 motel north of DFW again was uncertain, but the way over to Fort Worth was definite. I caught the hotel shuttle across Irving to DFW Airport Terminal B, nearby the TexRail station. The DART light rail station is on the other side at Terminal A.
The rail link to TexRail is on the lower. I can't tell if that voice is Scottish or not, it's too much echo.
From other terminals at DFW, one can catch the Terminal Link bus over to B Gates, where the TexRail station is a few minutes walk downhill via sidewalk. Fares by cash or card can be obtained, but I use the GoPass app at $4 for a day pass. I visited 2 weeks prior to this station, seeing not only this type of Stadler FLIRT diesel multiple unit light rail vehicle serving as rolling stock for Trinity Metro's TexRail service at the station, but also the addition of DART's Silver Line, this station being the endpoint for that separate fleet of FLIRTs built by Swiss manufacturer Stadler, but final assembly completed here in America on that line's trip over to Plano. This was my second time riding TexRail, and again upon boarding I confused this with a heavy rail interurban service. The build quality and comfort of these Swiss design cars just seems of a higher level of comfort, and levels of convenience are higher in its available table seating, USB-A power points, and overhead luggage space. This just doesn't feel like a tram, but more like a regional rail service. At 27.2 miles, it covers a distance comparable to other light rail lines in this and other North American cities, but the landscapes it traverses are variable enough, albeit briefly at just under an hour, to go from DFW Airport to the terminus at Fort Worth T&P station. We'll be alighting inbound today at Fort Worth Central Station, which is also where Trinity Metro bus connections can be made, along with a few daily Amtrak trains. The views westbound in the morning have the train casting a shadow across the sun-rising plains of suburban North Texas, which are where prairie grass buffers streets and mega freeways as the line is threaded through these suburban communities. The route is partially upon the old Cotton Belt rail line right-of-way, which will become more evident as we approach Fort Worth. The appeal of this service is its roundabout half-hour frequency across about 19 hours of daily operation. That kind of frequency is amazing not only for Texas, but America in general. If you consider this a commuter rail line, that is. As a light rail service, it would probably be considered lacking at that frequency. That's partly what keeps tricking my mind into believing this hybrid rail line is really a heavy rail application. It has more in common with New Jersey Transit's light rail operations, which also utilize Stadler rolling stock with the GTW DMU platform. There's an immense usefulness of the line connecting the nearby city of Grapevine to Fort Worth, but the airport connections at the closest stations to where we got on create a more universal appeal for folks needing parking options for traveling out of or working at DFW Airport. Grapevine, Texas led Trinity Metro, which is Fort Worth's public transit agency, in the implementation of a city sales tax in Grapevine back in 2006. That served as the basis for both the TexRail project in general as a viable project and the stations in the city limits of Grapevine. We'll be headed back to that town later via Northside Station eastbound after we have a walk around downtown late this morning. For the better part of the next hour, we have a mix of open prairies, suburban single-family homes in low density, and industrial buildings in high and medium density, as well as a few other freight railroads, a historic rail line, and a budding amount of transit-oriented higher density development later along the line. The latter is hoped to continue to grow with the line, but since TexRail's opening in 2019, it has had to contend with the trouble of lower than expected ridership in the early years of the 20s and the uncertainty of whether additional suburbs along the line will contribute to the bottom line of the service and finance stations in their cities to expand the usefulness of public transit throughout this chunk of the northern suburbs. That proposition has better legs now that DART's Silver Line to Plano is running. I'm very interested to return to DFW for a ride on that route. I would expect the Silver Line to share the issue of unifying suburbs that don't want to contribute to mass transit budgets, as well as zoning restrictions that have set up DFW's regional network of public transit by rail to be as wonky as it presently is. Only in Grapevine can a TexRail station be the centerpiece of a community and a historic downtown, though Grapevine is notably defined as a different kind of downtown character compared to its neighbors, as we'll see later. For most of the route, TexRail is on the edges of suburban communities and it often shares its routing with industrial rail, either nearby or on its right-of-way. The line is single track for most of its route, with sidings for trains to pass each other, allowing schedules to be kept. Freight interference thankfully isn't an issue, being TexRail's line is independent of spurs of freight lines along the way. It's somewhat difficult to justify a transit-oriented tourism jaunt to the suburban stations on this line other than Grapevine. They're all useful for those that live in these cities in proximity to the station especially. There's some nearby walkability, more bikeability in the form of trails, but all could be improved on. Then there's the park and rides, of course, but for an airport line, this is less of an issue and more of a solid selling point and feature for the line. TexRail is a diamond in the rough of middle American public transit. It's carved out a niche with good frequency and a solid hard product in the Stadler rolling stock. It has expandability toward its originally intended endpoint in the southwest neighborhoods of Fort Worth, as well as infill stations, should those suburbs seek to join Trinity Metro. But this is obviously a time in America where such will be difficult to achieve on a public option basis alone. Private operation has been considered, but Trinity Metro continues to take the reins. The line is operated by Trinity Metro, but maintained by Herzog Transit under contract to a subsidiary company. On the eastbound ride, we'll see the storage and maintenance facility where these DMUs are serviced. That's another future improvement to the line that's possible on a very far-out basis: electrification. Obviously, the price tag for that makes it presently an unmanageable proposition, but electric rolling stock could run more efficiently on a somewhat faster schedule. But the versatility of these diesel-propelled multiple units can't be denied. They're also a great face for the service. They look great. I haven't heard of many issues in their initial decade of operation, other than the signaling issues on the line that occurred just prior to the intended opening back in 2019, but that only set operation back by weeks. TexRail is a fairly useful service as is, but running it as a regional rail service with cooperation of TRE's Dallas commuter rail line and DART's new crosstown Silver Line, as well as its existing light rail network of relatively expansive reach, give people in North Texas a slightly different set of commuting options than most American cities afford their citizens. as we saw in the video where I took microtransit across Dallas and eventually to Buc-ee's in Denton, this region is far off from having public transit that is marketable as a daily solution for most commuters. Public transit is heavily centered on Dallas and Fort Worth proper, two large cities that have relatively sparse public bus networks, and they're more akin to their neighboring suburbs than most large cities. Their implementation of microtransit as a first or final mile option means folks living without cars on a short or long-term basis have much longer commute times and more uncertainty of consistency than they would with regular route buses, or of course, Ubers, Lyfts, or just driving with someone else. TexRail is on a good basis on which to create more routes like this one to the airport in this region and other destinations. It has cleanliness and comfort on its side as a great selling point for Trinity Metro, which as far as American transit agencies go, is certainly trying to work a competitive and visible level of inspiration into marketing its services to riders. It's really the better side of Dallas-Fort Worth on this trip and my first trip, which was that one, as I said in the earlier video, was the one with the really dirty and uncomfortable DART stations and rolling stock. This is and continues to be a transit oasis in the middle of Texas, but it is a good one and an enjoyable hours-long ride, and you get to see plenty of great scenes, whether you're a rail fan or just like the convenience of the service. It's a fine, comfortable ride that most people would take to the airport, no problem. But will they continue to take it within, between, and beyond their communities? That's something we'll only see as TexRail continues its first decade of operation, and hopefully many more to come. I am all about this street corner table chair thing in Fort Worth right now. And better coffee than the motel. Alighting downtown, I had no particular schedule, so I took a walk across the Trinity River and down the sun-beaten riverfront park side and its trails to the opposite side of downtown, into which I would venture upon a somewhat obscure major station in Amtrak's network. Fort Worth Central is a strangely well-kept as well as humble cathedral for intercity and local public transit ridership. From here you can get a free bus around downtown Fort Worth, or buy a sleeper car accommodation to Chicago or Los Angeles and beyond with Amtrak. It may not have the history of Dallas's EBJ Union Station, but its utility seems dependably obvious. The historic train cars on display distracted me so as to be completely unexpecting the fact that I was about to ride the best BRT line in America. Trinity Metro's Orange Line BRT is obviously a bus in Texas. Plucky guitar music or cowboy-style balladeering instrumentals play, and the scenery attempts to simulate an idyllic plain, where you, the transit rider, exists prior to being let off at the historic Fort Worth stockyards, where everyone gets their meaty wallets processed into raw revenue for the tourist-trapped businesses that line the avenues of this historic district. Of the rodeo, and it smells like it too. Kind of interesting history. I just read on a sign that the stockyards was made possible by Boston investors way back in the day. If Billy Bob's went as far as driving now without my $4, they'll probably do just fine. It's kind of more like a spiritual saltine, cleansing my palate with something overly touristic to say, no, you're right to keep just riding buses around to the various commercial districts. Don't get me wrong, barbecue and bull riding sounds like a great time, but it's already been done on a lot of YouTube videos, and I'd like to get over to Grapevine and see those old trains. Good Lord, that's a good deal. And a pineapple empanada. Well, that sandwich would have been a good deal if it had a Diet Coke in it. Why can't we have big Mexican grocery stores like this in Minnesota? They have better marketing in Fort Worth. This bus might be too much for me to endure if I was a local too jaded on the local identity culture. If there was an ope and hot dish bus that masqueraded as BRT in Minneapolis or Minnesota, I'd probably walk the neighborhoods it traversed rather than have such culture forced upon me on my daily commute. All the same, as an incidental happening, it was an amusing ride. Cows are pretty appealing. The bus says, "Howdy, partner." Because this is the single track portion of TexRail. I mean, the scrap metal business is a great show. I really wanted to do more microtransit in Fort Worth, but Grapevine just has a lot of historic train cars, and I don't want to miss that. Knowing that I need to be at DFW at about 4 to 4:30 o'clock. I mean, TexRail will get me there really quick. Grapevine's right next to the airport, but after yesterday, I think we proved the microtransit has its limitations, namely in that it will strand you at some point, force you to spend more money on an Uber or Lyft. So it's probably better in Fort Worth, but I mean, I have a backpack on my back too. Trudging all around in 90-degree heat with that it's a little something more. That's as interior of a station as this gets. It's definitely a good bus transfer point for the north side. BRT had just missed a connection at Northside Station with the previous eastbound train, so I had about 20 minutes to wait and rail fan the westbound TexRail run, as well as the scrap metal show that never got old.
You are at Northside Station. Está en la estación de Northside. 5 minutes.
Eastbound on TexRail gives a look at the south face of the Cotton Belt line. As a whole crosstown connection with the new Silver Line, this is an immensely important alignment upon which Trinity Metro and DART are making progress on a national scale. Crosstown routes that bypass downtowns like Dallas just aren't that common in North America. The given concept of spoke and hub models for mass transit systems continues to be the fault line that could swallow public transit's usability if not addressed with developments such as these rail lines that cross suburbs without diverting passengers into city cores. Passenger rail that works acceptably for even a portion of DFW suburban residents is going a lot further than other notably transit-friendly metro areas have accomplished.
We believe it's locked. Very Amtrak-esque. Very Northeast Corridor-esque. Is it a button or a thing? No, it's a thing. It works, but...
To get between suburbs on opposite sides of a metro via passenger rail without going downtown or connecting on a bus is a rarity in America. That Texas has been able to make such a reality happen is inspiring, but also cautious.
Use the elevated walkway.
Just earlier this year, it was possible that Amtrak would be ending its Heartland Flyer service from Fort Worth to Oklahoma City due to Texas state government writing the service out of their budget. The Associated Transit Agencies of North Texas around DFW ended up picking up more of that operating expenditure to save the service. So, for these lines like TexRail, a careful yet ambitious strategy to expand ridership among locals and tourists to make up for those funding concerns will be necessary for all operations to be viable over the coming decade. Thankfully, in addition to suburban commuters' need to fly beyond Texas via DFW Airport, Grapevine has positioned itself as a revenue-driving commercial district that seemingly wants to develop a downtown of higher density but marketably historic character around its TexRail station located in the historic Central Business District, which is nestled just off the main drag from the freeways that carry most commuters through town. These residential-heavy suburbs like Richland Hills that support Trinity Metro and TexRail now have another project on which residents can hang their hats and call their cities more accessible in terms of transit options. A lot of large urban centers don't see rail on a separate right-of-way, though many have fewer at-grade crossings than TexRail. Still, these trains are a novel model for North Americans to see, and present the service as something more than a container full of people from the city that are coming into their communities. If only there were more regular and frequent bus routes from the stations that could carry folks the final mile dependably. I'm not sold on microtransit doing that job, as the concepts currently stand. The professional operation of TexRail and the snappy marketing of Trinity Metro might go a long way, if people get out of their cars and use the service. But as usual, if a car is necessary to access TexRail via Park and Ride for usefulness outside of folks needing to go to DFW Airport, the chances of more people turning to TexRail and DART for their daily commuting needs are low, given the price of gasoline in Texas. Maybe the proliferation of Cybertrucks in DFW, along with some supercharging stations at TexRail Park and Rides, would bring in the ridership maybe? I don't know. At least there's plenty of room for ideas here. Weinberger's Deli does great at being both a small, crowded deli with way too many sandwich options to choose from, like New York City would have, as well as a purportedly Chicago-aligned house of beef and cold cuts on bread. On its own terms, it owns all of the obvious success today with this fabulous hoagie. I have yet to find a cold sub as wonderful as this experience went down. Nicely done, Grapevine. Best sandwiches. Grapevine, Texas, best sandwiches. And I found out that they have a British food emporium. So, we gotta see what we can get. I could bring that home on the plane, right? Oh, neat. I call this store my Texas Biscuit and Crisp connection. Who'd have thought that just beyond DFW Airport there's a store selling reasonably priced European imports that has such a fun feeling to its shopping experience? Watch for a future DFW Airport video to see what I'll be snacking on during my Sun Country flight back to MSP later on this day. Great, now we've got our British snacks for our domestic flight back to Minneapolis. I think there's still some time to kill in Grapevine, so let's get some coffee. On the way back from buying British foodstuffs in Grapevine, you can check out the old jail. Then grab a drink at Landmark Coffee, which is housed in an old service station on the main drag. Sit underneath the overhang and enjoy it on the patio. From there, it's all the shops you can afford to either shop or avoid depending on your airline's luggage policy, before wandering down a side street to be a looky-loo at the Grapevine Vintage Railroad's lot of historic buildings and rail cars, including some Bud SPV 2000s, which, unlike the Stadler FLIRTs we've been enjoying on TexRail, did not have as reliable a reputation during their run on Amtrak in the late 1970s and early 80s. And this car is labeled Domestic Water. They now provide extra capacity for excursion trains out of the Grapevine Vintage Railroad, which is the other railroad to operate, albeit occasionally, on the historic Cotton Belt line with TexRail. This food hall next to the station seems well priced for how new, shiny, and massive the ceiling height is. There's a free public bathroom too. Having the vintage rail cars within sight of the TexRail platform makes Grapevine Station like flypaper for rail fans, kids, and people who know how to have a good time in general. The variety of stores and historic elements downtown make this one of the good tourist traps, the ones that include those like me that don't open their wallets into the wind when they travel. My ride back to DFW for my ride back to MSP on Sun Country came just as I was ready to close out my day with some air-conditioned plane spotting.
You're traveling to DFW Airport to catch a flight and are unsure where you need to go. Please ask the conductor for a copy of our airport wayfinding guide.
Estación del aeropuerto. Este folleto brindará detalles sobre cómo llegar a las terminales de la estación del ferrocarril.
TexRail is convenient enough to just show up at the station with a general idea of when you want to be at the airport and expect to catch a train within a reasonably short wait time.
Stand clear of the closing door.
The seats are getting somewhat worn, their padding compressed aboard these Swiss-designed trains, which is either a testament to European seating concepts or an indication that ridership to and from the airport is making TexRail something towards a successful route. If you had to choose between taking DART to Dallas or TexRail to Fort Worth for your stay in the DFW metroplex, I'd encourage TexRail and Fort Worth to be your choice. It's a much better train to what I perceive as a more civilized tourism experience in Fort Worth. That Grapevine is along the way is a great happenstance and should bode well for the usefulness of the line as more than just an airport connector. But it also enables you to bring home a checked suitcase full of canned haggis, should you so desire. And how many transit systems in America can say that? Well, thanks for watching this video. I hope it showed you something about TexRail that all the other videos on YouTube that have come up around the time that the Silver Line opened up have maybe also showed you. In any case, I've got more stuff to come, including this ride around DFW on the Skylink with a few interesting airplanes. I'll see you next time.